So today we're going to be talking about chapter 24, section 3, and the title of this is Nationalism. Nationalism contributes to the formation of new nations. So in the classic Star Wars struggle, you've got the rebels, but then they become the new republic. They are eventually a nation. What began as revolutionaries became a nation with its own political order, with some version of democracy, hopefully, though we don't really see, I don't know. That ultimately resulted in its own drama. So, two basic views of nationalism here. Number one, nationalists use their common bonds to create states. So if you're thinking about your Fortnite squad, okay, who do you want? Well, you can pick whoever you want. That's the beauty of Fortnite. If you don't want to play with that person, don't play with that person. Form your own squad. You guys can meet up and play whenever for obsessive amounts of time. And that's great for you guys. You form your own bonds with friends from who knows where. That's, again, another fun thing about it. You could play with somebody from Zimbabwe. And if they're cool, great, play with them. If they're not, don't. You have absolute freedom to play with whoever you want, whenever you want. You identify with your own group, and you have absolute freedom to leave said group. Your group can be, I'm not a Fortnite expert, I'm assuming your group can be as big as you want. Is that right? No? 4? That's a small nation. Okay, that's a bad example. Well, anyway, I tried. Okay, so you can squat up in other different things and have guilds, and I guess Fortnite doesn't do guilds. Well, anyway, so you can have your own group, and if you want that group to be whoever, pick whoever. And you form those common bonds for yourselves, and you form those nation states. Well, the bigger the group becomes, the more organization it requires. So if Fortnite is an example of a small squad, which, yay, you can just argue amongst the 4 of you, think about a game where you have guilds, and where some of those guilds become huge. Anybody play a game like that? Clash of Clans is one. What else is another? What's that? Guild Wars. Okay, I'm not familiar with that one, but Battlefield has guilds. Okay. I'm going to go super nerd mode here. I used to play World of Warcraft. It had guilds, and it had huge guilds, the size of nations with, yeah, I did. Okay, well, anyway, huge guilds, size, like I think level 30, and then I gave up. So, no, I didn't go that far with it. But it was fun while it lasted. So anyway, you can meet people and you can join guilds, and some of these guilds are the size of actual countries. It's just that huge of an online environment. So when you get a group that large, well, you're going to need some organization. You're going to need leadership. You're going to need structure. And so the bigger the nation gets, well, the more organization it needs. And so there's 3 basic types of nationalistic movements. First off, unification. That is, hey, you guys are cool. Hey, you guys are cool. Let's squad up. Unification. You're just wandering around getting blown up in Fortnite. Hey, I like wandering around getting blown up in Fortnite. Okay, let's team up. That's unification. That's coming together. One basic type of nationalistic movement. Hey, Texas, you just had a revolution against Mexico. You guys speak the same language as us. You have a lot in common. You want to squad up. And Texas is like, totally, let's squad up. And Mexico, of course, if you know the story, which we'll get to in American history, was like, hey, that's not cool, because Texas's annexation with the United States was a form of unification with the United States, but it was also a form of separation from Mexico. And Mexico obviously was not too happy about that. It was a form of separation that split off what Texas viewed as a culturally distinct group. And then finally, there's state building. This one is really tricky. This is probably the most complicated of the 3. State building. Like Peter the Great, it's when you bring in culturally diverse regions and try to make them one. And that has been one of the classic struggles of the United States, is state building. Because, why? Well, if you live on the opposite side of the country, you might not have a whole lot in common with somebody in Florida or Alaska or California or the U.S. Virgin Islands or Puerto Rico. you just might not know anybody there. You might not have any ties. So why should you care what happens to someone on the big island in Hawaii? What is it to you? And so the process of state building is also a tricky one. Squatting up is easy. Breaking up squads, also easy. Forming together a diverse group of people into a large community, very hard.
Until the 1900s, Russia was an empire ruled by a czar, or king. All czars came from the same family, the Romanovs, and they had ruled for 300 years. The czars created a society in which the rich landowners lived a life of luxury, while the workers and peasants struggled to survive. But at the turn of the 20th century, the people began to cause problems for the Tsar. Why did the people cause problems for the Tsar? Through the years, the Russian Empire had expanded to control a huge area of Europe and Asia. Because it was so large, the empire was now home to people of many different ethnicities, religions, educations, and wealth. All these people want different things. Some want land, some want more freedom, some want government reforms. These demands soon become a threat to the rule of the czars. Sometimes the czars give the people what they ask for, like giving local assemblies control over schools and roads. But more often than not, the czars oppress the people. An example of this oppression is Tsar Alexander III's program of Russification, launched in the 1880s. What is Russification? The Tsar insists that everyone speak one language, Russian, and have one religion, the Russian Orthodox Church. It is official religious and ethnic persecution aimed at building a common national identity. The Jewish populations in Poland and the Ukraine are particularly singled out and often attacked. Many Russian Jews become refugees and flee the country for Europe and the US.
And so this partly explains the breakup of some of these large empires. So you've got the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It's huge. It's the result of wars of conquest that united people from diverse ethnic groups. Yet, by 1866, the empire was losing power. And it was losing its hold on these diverse groups. So eventually the empire began to break up. It still had an emperor. You know, by Return of the Jedi, there was still an emperor. But many entire planets had rebelled against the empire. And so while there was still an emperor in name, the size of their influence was decreasing, even though they had a Death Star. Go figure. Well, in Russia, after 370 years, the Russian czars began losing control of their empire. Why? Because it's huge. Guess what? Having a having a huge empire is not always a good thing. The Mongols may have conquered more land than any other people, but in the end, their empire did not last long. So they're the classic story of Ozymandias, where everyone feared the Mongols, but there's nothing left of them now. So what do they matter? Everyone was afraid of them. Nobody messed with them. They never got beaten. But about 200 years later, they're all gone. And now they're one of the poorest countries in the world. Go figure. So Russia controlled one of the largest empires in the world. But the czars began to lose control of their empire. Peter the Great's policy of Russification was the idea that if we can get everybody to shave their beards, if we can get everybody to wear suits, if we can get everybody to speak the same language and ideally join the Eastern Orthodox Church, yay, we're all Russian. Woo! But here's the problem. Some people like having beards. Some people don't want to wear suits. Particularly, not everyone wants to attend the Russian Orthodox Church. And also, not everyone wants to learn Russian. It doesn't matter where they live. See, Russia's huge. If you go to the eastern part, they're ethnically Asian. They have more in common with the Mongols than they do Europeans. If you go to the north, it's Siberia. I mean, it's frozen. You never go up north. And so the policy of trying to unify a diverse group actually hurt their efforts. Excuse me. So, when talking about the Austro-Hungarian Empire, I mean, all the different colored countries here were once part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And now, you get all of these: Croatia, Slavonia, Bosnia, Serbia, Romania, Transylvania, by the way, is a country, Galicia, Slovaks, Moravia, the Czechs. All of these places were once part of this huge empire that when it became weak, these people no longer identified as Austro-Hungarian. So it also results in the breakup of many of these empires. So the Ottoman Empire is another classic example. You get internal tensions among ethnic groups, and that can weaken an empire. So what if you think of America not as a nation state, but as an empire? And what if you think of the story of the sectionalism that led up to the Civil War, which I'll make the case in American history that it is entirely about slavery. But what if you look at it from the perspective of these people simply don't identify as American anymore? Granted, they don't identify as American anymore because of slavery. But if you just make the case they don't identify as American, well, then you wind up with the same story in America as what's happening in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, as what's happening in the Ottoman Empire. I mean, every now and then Vermont just kind of throws out the idea of separating from the United States. You know, they haven't seriously tried it, but every now and then they just kind of tweet that to kind of throw it out there and see what happens. Hey, what if we left? Would you miss us? And typically America goes, shake their finger. And Vermont's like, okay, just kidding. LOL. Post a meme and forget about it. You know, but no. Actually, Vermont kind of wants to leave. They're kind of like they're in a bad relationship and they're just kind of waiting for their opportunity. So I want to investigate Italy here as a case study. So Italy is a collection of all of these former imperial territories. What was once the Holy Roman Empire, then it became the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and so on and so forth. Well, in 1815, the Italians no longer identified as Austro-Hungarian or Holy Roman or whatever. They said, let's call ourselves Italians. And this movement was led by a man named Camillo de Cavour, who was the prime minister of one of these tiny little kingdoms about the size of a county in Italy called Sardinia. And the Austrians, meanwhile, said, that's great that you want to leave, but we'll kill you. So you can talk about leaving, but we're going to kill you. And, you know, at this point, we're in toxic relationship mode, right? You know, now they're threatening. Oh, that's not good. Okay, so you want to leave? Leave. See what happens. And the Italians are like, no way. We want out, but how do we get out? Hey, France. You know, hey, big brother, can you help me out here? This person's being creepy. So big brother France comes, steps up. And with the help of France, Giuseppe Garibaldi led the movement and conquered all of southern Italy in the name of independent nationalism. Cavour, as the king of Sardinia, was invited to lead this new nation called the New Nation of Italy. So what's crazy when if you're a Second World War buff, You've got this revolution that began in 1848. So they're a new baby country. New baby country, yay, so cute. That failed about 50 years later. Average, it's not bad for a country to last about 50 years. It's actually longer than the average. But it failed about 50 years later. And then you get fascist Mussolini. Oh, and then they killed that guy. And then you get the near fall to communism and collapse of the state entirely when, the Americans invaded. And we actually had to go back to the process of nation building with Italy. Because nationalism in theory works, but a baby country is more likely to die than succeed, unfortunately. Just like marriage is great in theory, but you're about 50-50 on whether or not it's going to last.
Verdi was now an international figure, and his works were performed all over the world. Good businessman that he was, he saw to it that they got proper treatment and that he was paid his proper fee. He travelled extensively to ensure this, usually without Giuseppina. In 1859 they were finally married, quietly, in a little village in Savoy near Geneva. Why they took so long about it is a mystery no one can solve. Not only were Verdi and Giuseppina united in musical tastes, they were also united in their politics. In 1848, rebellion had begun in Italy, but it was to take years of effort and finally warfare under the care of two men in particular before a free Italy was achieved. Giuseppe Garibaldi was the military leader of the revolutionaries, who, although he didn't always succeed in his military efforts, was nevertheless seen by the Italians as the great patriot who sowed the seeds of freedom, and he's celebrated in statues and monuments all over Italy. Of course, Verdi supported him, sending him money to buy rifles. A man particularly after Verdi's heart was the Count Camillo Cavour, a Piedmontese aristocrat, but now recognized as the real father of modern Italy. His methods were mostly diplomacy and argument, but when that failed, he was not afraid of war. With the help of the French, Garibaldi's troops finally defeated the Austrians, and they were driven out of Italy. It was a delirious moment. When an all-Italian parliament was finally convened, Cavour persuaded Verdi to stand as a deputy. Cavour died only a year later, and although Verdi ardently supported the new united Italy, he was disgusted by the politics of power and retired from Parliament on his friend Cavour's death. But Italy never forgot his act of faith, and of course the inspiration of his music, beginning with Nabucco. It is hardly surprising he occupies a very special place in the Italian heart.
Next case study, Germany. So Germany was once the Holy Roman Empire. Well, once it was just called Germania, where all these German-speaking Anglo-Saxons went around killing people with axes when they were being threatened by other people. So, it has a neat history that I love to study. But let's fast forward to 1815. There were 39 different German states. So what was once the Holy Roman Empire is now, Saxony, Bohemia, I don't know, some of the sausages are named after them. There's like beers named after some of the German states. I can't remember them all. There's 39 of them. What was once a nation broke up into a million pieces. They called themselves the German Confederation, but really the only thing they had in common was a language and an agreement to help each other if they were all attacked. So it's not unlike after Star Wars, imagine the Empire has fallen. Okay, political stability, and that's why Force Awakens happened, because it failed. Because the political instability that was once the Empire, there's no longer a Death Star, so everybody just kind of goes their own way. And that's what happened when the Holy Roman Empire failed. Okay, Darth Vader's down, but now what? The strongest of the German states was called Prussia. It had an extremely powerful army. It was mainly made up of ethnic Germans, and they created a constitution under the idea of unifying all the German-speaking peoples into a nation. Now, when Otto von Bismarck sought to unite all the German-speaking peoples, he did this because he believed it was what was best, but he was willing to use any means necessary to make it happen. I mean, he was playing some Game of Thrones hardcore, like on level 50. Now, to do this, he was willing to do anything. And that theory is called realpolitik. This is the same time when Machiavelli wrote The Prince. Meanwhile, now the leader of Prussia, Otto von Bismarck, is going to go to war with all these other German states and anyone who opposes him. And he's going to conquer and win and win and win and gain more and more territories. Here he is, by the way. And just look at that guy. Like, he is like the human version of a pug. But nobody's going to say that about him because he'll kill them all. Because he's straight up realpolitik. I mean, that's just, yeah. Okay. So Bismarck has, a loose alliance of German states. He's kind of holding these people together. But what's going to unite them better than a war? So he has to create a war to bring his people together. Because again, realpolitik means playing dirty. So I'm going to start a war here to get everybody riled up. And so he creates a border dispute with Austria to provoke war for the purpose of uniting his country. And guess what? It worked. It worked. It worked in a way that no law or no policy or big music festival could ever do in terms of uniting people. And he managed to join the eastern and western parts of the Prussian kingdom. He managed to unite all the German people because when the war with Austria was over, he was like, well, I'm not done yet. Let's go to war with France. So he goes to war with France. Why? For the heck of it. Because they're French. Let's go get them. And throughout the war with France, in the process of uniting all the German-speaking peoples, they actually rewarded this guy, created the nation-state of Germany, and crowned Wilhelm, the Kaiser of Germany, and dominated by Prussia, but yet still the new nation of Germany. And so here they are, all uniting, blowing up and killing things. So, in 1815, when the Napoleonic Wars were over, the Treaty of Westphalia was agreed to, that all of these kingdoms would be created for the purpose of maintaining a balance of power to prevent a Napoleon from ever rising again. But all of that balance of power and peace and prosperity was undone because now Germany is becoming so powerful, and it's almost inevitably leading to the First World War. And meanwhile, Austria was weaker, Russia was weaker, and the balance of power is being disrupted here.